Hello, I'm James,
Hi, I'm Jimmy,
and welcome to A Job Done Well.
the podcast that helps you improve your performance and enjoyment at work.
Good afternoon, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you, James?
I'm fabulous, thank you very much for Wednesday. Halfway through the week. Although in my position, the week loses its meaning. Yeah, the old semi-retirement thing is great. I no longer have the Monday morning blues, but I don't get that Friday afternoon feeling either. So it's a bit 6 and 2 3s. Anyway, what are we talking about today then?
Today, we are discussing the topic of managing upwards.
Oh, I'm going to get a masterclass, am I?
You're going to give a masterclass.
Jimmy's sitting here with his little white hat with his eye holes cut out. He is the grand master of managing upwards.
I'm not sure that's the analogy we want to be using.
Anyway, so we're going to talk about managing upwards, and maybe is it playing politics or is it good for your career? That's a fair question.
A much maligned subject that we are going to discuss how you can get value out of it, do it well, do it authentically, without feeling like a brown noser.
Ah, all right, there you go. So anyway, in the interim, what have you been up to this week?
A couple of things this week. I am still basking in the glory of Forest winning at Anfield at the weekend.
Ah, very good.
First time in 55 years.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Anfield in Liverpool. I bet you're a man.
Do you know that's in Liverpool?
Yeah, because I went to university there.
I was going to say, ain't because your football knowledge.
No, it's not. You're right.
But I've just got back from a week in Ibiza. Me and Dick and the girls.
How did that go? Did you have your full-on sort of Love Island look? You know, your white shirt and your white shorts.
Yeah, we were out there at Ocean Beach. But we had a really great time. But one of the things that I observed, we stayed in this hotel, and it was fantastic, 5-star hotel, really nice. But the service was poor.
All right.
And just everything about the hotel, whether it was the way that the number of sunbeds they had, the coffee machines, the lifts, the toasters, everything didn't quite work. It was like they'd cut corners all over the place. And as a result, service really suffered. But the thing that made it stand out the most, they had the main restaurant's buffet restaurant, right? Really good food, but you had to queue up. Normally in a buffet restaurant,
you just walk in and
straight in and eat, you know. We had to queue up to half an hour at one point to get in to serve yourself in a buffet restaurant. And it was just, you looked at it, the restaurant itself wasn't that busy, you know, plenty of food, and they've run out of everything, drinks were served nice and everything. It was just the fact they didn't have enough people sitting you down. You just think, you look at it,
so hang on, let's
spend
just get really
a small
straight.
amount of money.
You did some bottleneck analysis, didn't you?
That's not what I would call it. I call it getting pissed off when you're at
My work
holiday.
is done. My work
But
is
you
done.
can see it, and it's just like, just for the cutting small corners, just the experience has been transformed for all of their guests.
Yeah.
What have you been up to?
Well, I have been worrying about much deeper things.
Okay, what?
Well, I listened to, I'll mention another podcast. The Rest is Politics, very interesting podcast.
Stiff competition.
Yeah, stiff competition.
They're only marginally more popular
They're very
than us.
worried about us. But they were talking about the Darcy report, which is the whole thing about how well the NHS is or isn't run. And that was quite fascinating. Tragically, I might pick up the whole report and have a look at it.
Well, there could be an episode in that for us in the future.
But they were just talking about, you know, some hospitals perform really well.
Yeah.
And other hospitals don't. So you've got variation in the system. They were talking about technology. And on the one hand, you've got people pinning their hopes on digitisation. But then on the other hand, they're just pointing out that actually, despite all the extra technology they put in, productivity has got worse.
So it don't matter whether we go to the NHS or luxury hotels in Ibiza, the law, the thinking comes to life.
Well, there you go. So very interesting stuff, I think. And what is really sad is I feel that we are very qualified to go and sort out a hotel in Ibiza, whereas the NHS, we probably shy away from that one. But on to more important things. Managing upwards. So go on then, describe what it means and what we're talking about.
So we're talking about how you manage relationships with senior people in your organisation. And like you and many others, early in my career, I shied away from it. I didn't want to get involved in it. I didn't see the value in it, didn't feel a comfortable exercise or anything. Later in my career, I realised actually the importance of it and how you can get value from it. But it's a negative term, managing upwards.
Oh, yeah. He's
very
good at managing upwards. It's not something you say about somebody you like, is it?
No, and the connotation is really that they haven't done anything to deserve it. You're busy managing upwards instead of doing the work and delivering results. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it has got a very bad reputation, and I have to admit it is something that I personally feel quite uncomfortable about. But I do think there is a frame of reference associated with it, and we should talk about that. But as you know, I do like a good Venn diagram.
So you've got a law the model
I've
for
got
us
a law
on
the
this
model
one.
for you.
Go on.
And if you go online, you can go to our website. I will put the law the diagram up there. But it's brilliant, a Venn diagram. So you've got
you know when you have to keep referring to stuff you do is
brilliant. This is deep thought. This is. So you've got 2 circles interlocking. You remember that?
I remember what a Venn diagram is. Thank you.
Okay. How did you get in your
law
A-level
the
maths?
splanes?
Yeah, right.
Venn diagrams. Thank you.
Right. So on the one circle, you've got people who are very good at managing upwards.
Yeah.
And the other circle, you've got people who are very good at managing downwards.
Yep.
All had a boss like that. But there is actually a sweet spot where the person is very good at managing upwards and managing downwards. And that's the point you need to be in. It's a question of how do you get both. There is, of course, just being logically correct with my Venn diagram, there is another category, which is people who are no freaking good at managing upwards or downwards. And I've met a couple of those as well.
I bet you have. But in all seriousness, the sweet spot is what we're going to explore today. How do you manage upwards in the best way possible? So let's just talk about, well, why would you do it? And I think there are 2 big kind of drivers for this. One is you do it for yourself.
Yeah.
You do it ultimately to make your work life better. It can be to manage your career. It can be making people aware of what you have achieved, what your capability is. It can lead to promotions. It can lead to help in the future. It can lead to sponsorship. It can lead to investment. There's lots of things that help you personally in your work life.
Yeah.
The second bit,
which is the one I think I feel more strongly about.
It is your job.
Yes.
And it is about getting things done related to your job. So removing obstacles, getting help, developing a work pipeline, helping others. Yeah, all of these things. So I think they're definitely both add value. And your point will be, the second one is a lot more comfortable. It's a lot more tangible. It's a lot less selfish as the first.
I think the whole thing about being good at managing up and managing down, your team, the people who work for you, will really value it if you are doing it to remove obstacles, get work, stuff like that. So it's really, for me, that's the key to it. But I do take your points. There are ways in which it can help you get the job that you want.
Another point about your team is often I've found it good to share the achievements of your team so they can get recognition as well as you. I guess that's the fine line, is if you do it for you and you get recognition on your own
and for you alone,
that's selfish, and I think that's where it falls down. If you do it and you and your team get the
credit and the recognition,
then I think that's a real positive.
Absolutely. The whole basking in the glory of others.
People they like recognition, and it is the difference between basking in the glory of others versus standing on the shoulders of others, and that's the difference for me. But when I think about doing it for me personally, I remember one of our former bosses, Lindsay, he said to me, who's actually managing your career? Are you managing your career? Are you thinking about the opportunities? Are you creating the opportunities? Or are you just leaving it to your boss? Why is your boss in charge of your career? Because they will no doubt make decisions, sometimes for your interest, but ultimately in their best interest.
Yeah.
You've seen lots of instances where the boss holds on to somebody in their team too long, doesn't help them get promoted outside of their team.
Yeah.
All of those things is because you're just letting your boss do it, and your boss doesn't always have the time to do it. I remember Lee, a former boss of ours, he talked to me about it, and I was saying, well, surely you share my successes, my achievements, my capability with your peers and your boss, And he was like, well, when I see my boss, I've got 25 things to talk about, of which you're one of them. I'm not able to do you justice to that. You need to take responsibility yourself for sharing those things. And the reason why you're sharing them is because you're trying to help people. If they understand what things have worked for you, they can learn, they can understand, they can take advantage of that.
For me, it really is a question of, why are you doing this? Are you doing it just to promote yourself?
Yes.
Or are you doing it to promote the work you're doing and to promote your team and get opportunities for your team? And if it's the latter, I think it's great. If it's the former, then I really struggle with it. And a lot of this actually comes down to the organisation that you work in.
Yes.
So we have both worked in organisations where they have every 6 months the annual cull and put people in boxes, the old cross calibration or whatever you call it, and it just creates toxicity because everybody spends the last month of the year running around telling everybody what a great job they've done.
Yeah, but they're doing it in that instance. They're telling them for their own means. They're not telling them so that they can potentially, people can understand more about them, more about their capabilities for the future, what the opportunities are to create the work pipeline.
Yes, but that whole cultural thing has a big effect on the productivity of the organisation. There's an article published in I think it was the New Yorker, but they talked about Microsoft's lost decades.
Yeah.
And Microsoft's famous for their whole rank stacking process. And articles in there where people were saying, well, the political game was much more important within Microsoft than the technological game. So to get on, it was not about what you did, but what you were seen to do. And it can be really toxic. Yeah. So if you are running an organisation, the key thing is to minimise the need to do it unless it's for the benefit of the organisation.
Okay, before we get into how you do this well and how you do it authentically, what are some of the other things that you need to avoid? The show you're listening to right now brings you insights to help you improve performance and enjoyment of work.
It takes a long time to produce, but we think it's well worth it. It's all in the name of helping you getting the job done well.
All we ask in return is that you share the link to this show with someone that you think would benefit from it. And if you haven't already, click on follow the show wherever you're listening to this podcast right now. Anyway, let's get back to the show.
The key thing for me is just avoid showboating.
Yeah.
I had a boss for a while, and he would sit in meetings with his staff and his boss and his peers, sort of once every 3 month review type thing.
Yeah.
And he'd just take over. And you'd start to make your point, and he would take over. He'd make a load of spurious claims, which everybody who worked for him knew were rubbish, just so that he looked good in front of his boss. And it did nothing for the morale of the people around him.
To that point, you always have to remember your results, your objectives are almost always delivered by your team. It's not always just the work you do. So you piss them off, and the work they do will tail off without a shadow of doubt.
Another thing to avoid is covering up things that will make you look bad. So first of all, you can't fix a problem unless you've got to admit you've got a problem.
Well, it's the old thing about addiction, isn't it? Until you admit your addiction, you can never get better.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's one of the big things you see a lot of, people not admitting they've got a problem, and that does nothing for the organisation at all.
Well, do you remember we inherited a team of analysts from somebody who will remain nameless, and they were not there to find opportunities. They were there to spin stories to say, to make him look good.
Yeah. The whole sort of endless spinning of stuff.
People see through it.
Well, absolutely.
I don't think I think the trouble with some of these things that we're talking about avoiding is, in the short term, they may work. They may work in that meeting, they may work in that month. They are not long-term sustainable ways of getting things done and driving results.
So what about project du jour then? What do you feel about that?
I bet you, if you go around organisations now, like moths to a flame, people will be heading towards AI projects,
Diversity.
sustainability,
Yeah.
anything that is viewed in a certain way, you just want to be involved in them because they get you in the spotlight. Versus, are you involved in those projects because they really mean something to you, you're passionate about them, and you have the skills and capability to make them successful?
Yeah. And then the other thing is people who grab glory from others. Yeah, so don't give credit where credit is due is really something that you don't want. You will get much more respect from the people who work for you and the people that you are working for if you bask in their glory and demonstrate what your team has been doing.
So there's some of the things that you need to avoid, but let's look at some of the ways that you can do this, do it well, and get successful outcomes as a result.
Just offer help.
Yeah.
Right. So if you've got something that you can do, that your team can do, and that would help somebody else, and when I say help, be genuinely helpful. Yeah. A conversation which says, "Look, we could do this. Would this be of any use to you?" Yeah. So it's a great thing.
Also, the other thing is sharing experience and capability so that people know what's available. Because I found, particularly in big organisations, people just don't understand the capabilities that sit in your teams or in you, and so they don't actually know to come to you to get help. I think the flip side of offering help is equally as powerful, is ask for help.
Well, as long as it's genuine, but absolutely, right? Because people love to give advice. And if you honestly have, I mean, it's one thing going to the chief executive and asking him to be a mentor, for God's sake, pass me the sick bucket. But if you've got a thorny little problem and somebody can help you remove a roadblock or give you some advice, take them aside and just ask for a little bit of help, because people love to give it.
It's in human nature.
Yes.
We want to help. We want to help each other. That also helps you overcome some of the awkwardness of managing upwards, is because actually you realise that there's something in it for them in terms of they'll feel good being able to help you. And actually, in that example, there's one of the people that we used to work with who was far more senior than us and far more experienced, who I always used to ask for some help and advice, and his advice was always good because and it really helped us get the job done. It helped us in our jobs, didn't it? But ultimately, he then pointed me in the right direction for finding one of the best jobs I had in my career, which, if I hadn't have been working with him and asking him for help and had that relationship, I'd never have got that opportunity.
Yeah, so there's a bit of making your own luck, isn't there?
There is definitely. Another way of getting things done is when you've got those big decisions to be made that are made by committees or boards or whoever, large groups of people, going and engaging with people individually and informally can be a great way of getting things done, because people also want to feel that they've been involved and listened to on a subject. So you can make them feel good about it, but you can also understand where they're coming from, where their concerns are.
And divide and conquer, so that you just knock them off individually, understand what their positions are, rather than one big presentation where you don't know where their agendas are and you just get shot at.
Yeah, and quite often I find that when subjects are a bit controversial and they know there's going to be some opposing views, people will keep their head down. They won't manage their stakeholders in that way because they don't want to hear the bad news. Wait till you're in the big formal set piece. Get the bad news then. How's that work out for you? So engaging with the audience, it helps you get stuff done. It builds your credibility and relationships with senior people. So that's another good way of looking at it. You just got to remember you should be spending more time delivering than you do just telling stories.
I used to work for a bloke, I don't know if you remember him. His nickname was Rob the Knob, because he was just priceless at getting out there, telling stories, and everybody around him thought he was just a complete...
So now every Rob that you've ever worked with is wondering if they are. Why Rob the Knob?
Was it me? Anyway,
but in fairness, if your name's Rob,
you're probably going
to get that called that anyhow, aren't you?
What rhymes with Jimmy?
Skinny. But then maybe
That's
not.
not what I was thinking.
Maybe not. Anyhow, so there's some basis that you can do it on around giving help, asking for help, engaging people. But you've also got to just think about who the audience is and when you're doing it. So back to your point, rushing around doing it just before cross-cal is only ever going to look superficial, and doing it to people that there is no value for them, will always look superficial. I think that's key, is being authentic, really being aligned on what are the messages you're giving upwards, what are the messages you're giving downwards, thinking about the audience, thinking about how they're going to receive it, thinking about the impact it has on others. They're all things that go towards being authentic.
Right. And then another thing, because you've got on me on, is this whole thing about EQ, my personal strength, but just think a wee bit about the implication it's going to have on others. Yeah. Have I told you my Mitch Mel story? Remember that?
I remember it well, but I do think it is one of my favourite work stories. I think you should share it with our audience.
So we worked for a bloke anyway, the big boss was called Mitch. And Mitch needed some information about something. So he sent a note to my boss. My boss was called Bob at the time. Bob's a nice chap. And then Bob then forwarded this note on to me. And I looked at this note and I don't know, Mitch wanted some financial information. But he was obviously in a rush, and I don't know, maybe one of his thumbs had dropped off.
Banging the keyboard in anger.
Maybe his thumbs had dropped off. But I've never seen such a misspelt tirade in my life. Anyway, I obviously didn't have the information. Just another go-between lackey. So I passed it on to a lovely lady who worked for me called Maxine, and I said, Maxine, I'd be really grateful if you could get this for me. Mitch is obviously so apoplectic, he's lost the ability to spell. That was my email, which I then sent off to Maxine, and Maxine did a super job. She got the information, put it into a nice little PowerPoint, attached it to the original mail, and sent it back to everybody.
Oof.
So I came back to my desk, and there's this mail from Mitch which said, I'd like to thank Maxine for the information, and I'd also like to thank James Lauder for pointing out to the entire organisation that I can't spell. I was just...
How did you feel at that moment?
Just horrified. I ran round to Mitch's office to apologise, and he just creased up laughing at me at his desk. But it was just, what horrific. So, a little bit of EQ. Think about, if you're going to say this about somebody, would you like them to hear it?
So really, when we're talking about managing upwards, we shouldn't be listening to your advice.
No, probably not.
Be careful, everyone. Be careful when forwarding on emails. I can still remember the huddle of people that were around your desk when that mail had landed and you hadn't seen it yet. They were waiting for you to come back to a meeting so they could see your reaction to it.
It was addressed to everybody in the entire frigging organisation.
Stuff of dreams. But I think another really big, important part of how you do it is getting your mindset right about doing it.
Oh, absolutely. It's all about mindset and framing. It's about, am I doing this to either improve our work, get my team opportunities to do more work, get the job done. If it's doing that, then I'm golden. I can go in with the best of them. Yeah, it's when it is, look at me, then I really struggle. So I think there is something about mindset and framing.
And I think you're right, but my mindset around the stuff that you would say was me is slightly different.
Yeah, go on.
So I would think about it, as I mentioned earlier, not just about how you're showing off, but how you're sharing information, knowledge, experiences, how you're building relationships in order to get stuff done. And all of those things help you take control over your career when there are opportunities, when you do need advice. I think you've got to get your mindset straight in a way that helps you do this authentically and effectively to get the outcomes you want.
Right, but there's a philosophical debate here, isn't there? We have worked for people who have risen to great heights in organisations, been phenomenally well paid, and they only last, 2.5, 3 years?
Yeah, but they've been in all sorts of senior roles, and they are probably a damn sight more wealthy than either of us are. So on one level, you could look at it and say, haven't they been successful? But they would have ticked a lot of the boxes for the things that we have said don't do, right? So they have obviously got a mindset that tells them that is successful for them.
Yeah.
But personally, I guess I want to be successful on the basis of the positive impact I'm having, and I want to be able to sleep at night. And I don't want to have to spin stories about what a great job I'm doing.
Right. Have you heard the story about the monkeys in the tree?
No, go on.
A lot of organisations, it's like monkeys in a tree. If you're at the top of the tree and you look down, all you see is a bunch of happy smiling faces. But if you're at the bottom of the tree and you're looking up, all you see is arseholes. Yeah.
Very true, very
there you
true.
go. There's deep, there's profound for you.
In summary, where does this take us? I guess we can see that there is a lot of value in effectively and authentically managing upwards to make your work life better and get the job done.
But it is treading a fine line.
You are on thin ice with some of this stuff.
There are a lot of positive ways of doing it.
Yes. A lot of the same principles around how to do it and how not to do it, they also apply to networking in general.
Yeah, because people don't like networking.
Hopefully you can see the value in actually managing upwards. It isn't just for brown noses.
Yeah.
You'll want to be able to do this, and it will make you more confident and effective, which will in turn help improve your performance and enjoyment of work.
Yeah.
Which is what we're here for.
But I just want to leave you one final
Go on
thought.
then.
Don't be Rob the Knob. Anyway, we've mastered the dark arts of managing upwards, and then we'll speak to you next week.
And remember, if you've got any questions or comments about managing upwards, you want to know how to do more of it, get in touch.
Yeah, talk to Jimmy. Speak to you later. Have a
Thanks,
good week.
everyone.
We cover a whole host of topics on this podcast,
From purpose to corporate jargon.
but always focused on one thing: getting the job done well.
Easier said than done. So, if you've got unhappy customers or employees, bosses or regulators breathing down your neck,
If your backlogs are out of control and your costs are spiralling, and that big IT transformation project that you've been promised just keeps failing to deliver,
we can help. If you need to improve your performance, your team's performance, or your organisation's, get in touch at jimmy@ajobdonewell.com.
or James at jobdonewell.com.